morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first Intuity Tech Talk of 2019. We should have another year of valuable sessions. We've received some great topic suggestions from customers, and we're looking forward to sharing product details and tricks of the trade in the coming months. My name is Larry Balon, and I'm a system engineer for Intuity, and joining me today is my colleague Pete Bartz, also a system engineer. Pete will be doing the demonstration portion of our presentation today, and will be your host for the next 20 to 30 minutes. Please remember, these Tech Talk sessions are recorded and they'll be available at the Intuity YouTube channel. They're a good resource for learning more about product or reviewing features you may be interested in implementing. And just one housekeeping or a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Everybody's mic has been muted and to eliminate any outside interference during the presentation and demo. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the chat panel. We'll have time at the end to take questions that have been posted. So let's get started. Today, the basis for all of our demonstrations and discussions will be Intuity Network Analytics. This is called ENA. For BMC users, this product is known as Intuity Network Analyzer for TrueSite operations. ENA is an upgrade to Intuity 16.5. For anybody who's still on 16.5 and you're planning to upgrade this year, please feel free to contact your local Intuity system engineer. We'd be more than happy to give you a demo of the new release and its features. And if you need assistance in charting an upgrade path, then we'd be more than happy to help you with that as well. So today's topic is reducing event clutter. So we'll quickly cover the differences between events and incidents, what's the ideal use of rules, and some of the standard out-of-the-box features to reduce noise and have become more productive and have actually items show up in the dashboards that are actually actionable. And those are some of the benefits that you'll receive. And Pete will cover some use cases to help you reduce this event clutter. And, so the event management system Flowchart, most of you who have had recent versions of Intuity are familiar with this web page. It's the main landing page when you select event administration, and this is just designed to provide a flowchart of how Intuity processes events that come into the system. So on the left side, these are the types of events that typically will come into our system. System events are typically events that we poll for with our polling engine. It's not limited to that, but that's primarily what they are. We can take in trap-based events via SNMP traps. We can take in syslog messages. If you utilize the user-defined or custom poller, that's polling for custom OIDs, you can create custom poller specific events. And then you can also create your own events if you wanted to change the content of what an event message looks like within the display. We provide you with the tools to do that. The next part of the flowchart just indicates the various stages of event processing. When an event comes into the system, you can apply rules to it before it's even stored in the database, including discarding the events so that they never get seen. Once they go through the pre-storage rules, they're stored in the event database. There are post-storage event processing rules, and there's also incident processing. In our nomenclature, you can the rules are set on the raw events, and then we have what are called triggers for the incidents. Those incidents are then stored in the database. We also have the ability within our event management subsystem to forward event information, either raw events or via incident triggers, to external systems capable of receiving those events. We have several out-of-the-box integrations for those, and we've done other work with external cloud-based systems. This is just a a quick view. This is not an out-of-the-box dashboard for ENA. This is one that I've created for the demo today, and Pete has a similar dashboard that he'll show during the live demonstration. It consists of two dashlets. The left dashlet is the incident list, and the right dashlet is the events list. And it's just designed to show the difference between the two. Events are just, I call them raw events, because those are anything that comes into the system, such as a trap, a syslog message, a threshold crossing event, and in addition to that, the clearing events. They're all shown in the order that they're received by default. That's the way that this is displayed. And you'll see there's a difference between the raw events and the right pane dashlet as in reference to the incidents. Incidents maintain state. They can have a state of open, they have a state of closed. They expire after a certain period of time once they're closed, and then we have a concept of reopening. And so that's basically, the reopening is designed to reduce event clutter out of the box. You can see here in the left pane the number of incidents. That's how many times that incident has been received. So if you look at the first one, it's a device not responding to SNMP message. That incident has occurred 4,305 times. So rather than, if you go into the event log, you'll see that event 4,305 times. But because the incidents maintain state, what you'll see is a single incident and the number of times that has occurred. And with that, we're going to transition right into the demonstration, and I'll hand off control over to Pete.
Thanks, Larry. And I think my screen should be shared. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just to tie into what Larry was mentioning, in looking at the flow of events and as they become incidents, we talked a little bit about what an event is, what an incident is. If you're looking for some more information on that, just take a look. If you go to the Intuity website, if you go into the Help Center and you look at administration, and there's a section on events and incidents. If you take a look at that, you can drill into the events and incidents category. There's 18 articles that go along with this, and there's definition on what's an event, what's an incident, why are they, what's different about them, how to do specific things as well. So this is a good guide to get started on kind of defining and looking at what is the EMS for newer customers. If you've been a customer for a while, a lot of this is something that you already very likely know. So let's go back to this dashboard. This is actually one of my favorite dashboards. This is one that I created. It's actually an inventory type of dashboard. It gives me an idea, at least in my lab environment, the types of devices that I'm running. Again, this is not an out-of-the-box dashboard, but it's one that we can certainly send you the definition for, or you can build yourself. But it's one of the features within ENA that gives you that very dynamic dashboarding capability. And you can set up this dashboard to be viewable by specific customer groups. So there's role-based access that ties into this as well. Let me take a look at the incidents and the events that are going on in my system, because one of the things, the focus for today is noise. Networks can tell me a phenomenal story about how they're behaving. I can ask them questions via sending, looking for information like high CPU and applying a threshold against that, where it'll tell me a story that says CPU on this device is high. I can also get information via SNMP traps and syslog. So there's a wealth of information that the network can tell me and provide to me. And if I'm not careful, I end up with a lot of noise. So, I've been involved in managing and running networks for a very long time, and there's a lot of areas where they're providing me so much information where I actually can't see what's really going on in my network because of all the noise that's kind of overlaying it. So if I take a look at the same dashboard that Larry had shown in the slide, you can see that I've got a lot of events going on in my network, and predominantly I've got devices that are not responding to SNMP. But if I look at this, and if this is really what I'm paying attention to, it's really hard to weed out the stuff that might be important. And I don't even know if I've got anything that shows up on the screen that is important. So if I'm a knock, I'm going to look at this and go, oh, this makes no sense to me whatsoever, and I'm going to start to ignore it. One of the things that you want to do is start to leverage incidents. So again, an incident is a correlated set of events. Events are just things that happen on the network. An incident is something that carries state, like Larry had indicated, and will correlate things together. And there's a lot of stuff out of the box that's available and set up as an incident, and you can create your own as well. But it's a lot easier to look here and say, I've got some IPSLA issues, I've got some availability monitor issues with some applications, I've got some port issues, and I've got a whole bunch of devices that are reporting SNMP no responses. So if I look at the My Network view and I just look at the standard incidents, I'm going to see all of it anyway. It's a better method than looking at events. And obviously I can look at an incident and take a look at any of the contributing events for a specific incident. But incidents are a good way to do that initial triage. You can certainly filter within the dashboard and look at specific incidents, and I'll show you some examples of that as we move forward in the demonstration today. But looking at incidents is a good way to go as a start. But again, here I'm focusing on the My Network view, so I'm seeing everything in my environment. Now, after looking at this, one of the things that I want to eliminate from my network is going to be these device no response. So I've got SNMP issues on these devices. One of the things that I'll do is I think I'll create a view that has got a filter that says that view is going to include all the devices in my network, but I'm not going to look at incidents that are device not responding via SNMP. So one way to do this, certainly, and I've got this pre-built so it's easy to take a look at, but I've got a view set up here that has got an incident filter on it. And right away, out of the box, I can actually see a better view of what's going on in the network. I've filtered the incidents to get rid of the SNMP issues, but I'm seeing all of the raw events. So I can actually do a comparison. So this is an improvement. Now I'm starting to identify areas that are noise, and I've not yet looked at getting rid of the noise, but I'm actually just peeling back the noise to be able to see more of what's going on in the network. Because ultimately what you want to get to is a more proactive view into what's really happening. And if you're doing things like ticketing, you want to provide a higher quality of ticketing. So what you ticket on is actually stuff that isn't noise and is something that you have to pay attention to. So using a view and actually taking a look at the view definition here, you can see that I've got an event filter set up for the incidents. I'm picking up all the events, but my incident filter actually includes everything with the exception of devices not responding to SNMP right there. So I've just eliminated that incident out of my filter. And you can create these dynamically. So if you're going through an exercise of, I need to get rid of some of the noise, what is the noise? Okay, SNMP no response is a noise. Let's take that out, see what's left. So you start peeling that back. So this is a way where if I'm looking at my network, I can see everything, but if I look at a specific view, I can actually not only pick and choose the devices that are in that view, I can also assign a event and incident filter as needed to eliminate the stuff that might be pretty chatty that I don't have to pay attention to. So this is one method. Another method to look at would be to leverage a view that is focused on specific subsets of devices. This is something that many of you already leverage. So if I take a look at, let's go back and look at a couple different views that I've got. So I've just got a technology view. So my technology view says I've got a collection of all my routers. And what do I have for chatty devices that are routers? So again, I can focus on views that are device-centric. I can focus on views that are leveraging an incident or an event filter. These are ways within the UI, and I'll talk about some other ones later as well, but these are ways within the UI where you can actually start to identify the noise and kind of peel back through the noise to get a better picture. If you want to do this in terms of a report, One of the reports that I've used historically is in the activity section. So in the activity reports, it's the device health report. Now again, this allows me to be allows it to be focused on specific views if I choose to, and it allows me to identify any of the most chatty devices that are generating the most events. Normally, looking at this in terms of about a 24-hour period is sufficient. I can certainly change that if need be, but if I run this, I'm going to identify the kind of the top devices that are generating the most events. So this is a pretty good indication of the devices that are chatty. Now, the total events are showing up here, and then we're qualifying based on the types of events and what they really speak to. So port-based events, SNMP polling events. Oh, I've got a lot of issues here, and you can see that for most of these devices, the total count is the same as the SNMP polling issues. So these are probably all SNMP no response issues right here. But this switch up here, this is just a Dell switch that I've got in my lab, but I've got some SNMP issues, but I got other stuff going on. So I can just hit the hyperlink here, and this will drill into an event details report that will let me see everything that's been going on in the last 24 hours for this specific device. So again, in addition to using the dashboards within ENA, you can also leverage some of the reporting capabilities to get a better look. Now, the other report that you could actually leverage would be in the administrative section, especially if you're looking for things like SNMP issues, devices with SNMP response time, and devices failing SNMP polling. These are a couple of reports that you can leverage, especially if you're addressing the same issue that I'm seeing in my lab. So let's take a step forward and let's talk a little bit about the EMS. And in ENA, there are some standard out-of-the-box capabilities that are already turned on by default and some that you can enable right within the EMS. And these will enable you to eliminate noise. So once you're looking at identifying what the noise is, you can actually start looking at methods to eliminate it. Now, this is a different server that I've got in my lab, and this is more of an out-of-the-box configuration. So the standard, if I look at the EMS and go into the initial filtering stage, there's some standard rules that are available to you. You should see these in your environment. And I'm just going to walk very quickly through these because all of these, depending upon the type of monitoring that you're doing, are you including SNMP traps and syslog, or are you just doing polling-based kind of threshold and availability performance events? These filtering rules, again, some of them are enabled by default, some of them aren't. One of them here isn't. But these can help you eliminate some of the noise and still enable you to see what's going on in the network. The first one is the discard unknown trap. This is available out of the box. Unknown traps, if I take a look at this one, it's a pretty simple rule. But the event type unknown trap is the default event for any trap that comes into that's received by the Intuity server where that trap MIB hasn't been loaded into the EMS. So there's a process for loading the MIBs and creating trap events. I won't go into details on how that's done. There's a couple YouTube videos in the Intuity YouTube Center where you can actually take a look at that. But discarding unknown traps is one way that you can eliminate noise. If you don't care about traps at all, you can certainly enable this. Right now, out of the box, it's not enabled. And I think as a best practice, I would suggest that people look at unknown traps and then make a conscious decision, because traps can tell you a very powerful story about the behavior of your network. You just don't want to get overwhelmed by stuff that makes no sense. So unknown traps out of the box before you start creating trap events is something that you can leverage. If you need to eliminate that because you don't care about doing anything with traps, just enable this rule and deploy the project and we'll automatically discard them. The next one that we'll take a look is, again, looking at those unknown trap events. And this is a deduplication. This is enabled out of the box, and it's intended to eliminate and reduce, well, not eliminate necessarily, but reduce the flood of events from traps on a given source. So if I've got devices that are throwing a lot of traps, I'm going to eliminate that and narrow down what I'm seeing because I'm going to deduplicate every 2 minutes. Now, this is just a template. You can leverage this. You can create another deduplication rule with a different time period, or you can just modify the time period if you choose to. So this is a way to, again, eliminate some of the noise that can be created by traps that you've not yet added into the system as a defined event. Same thing with SNMP authentication failures. This is actually, authentication failures has been an event that, in working with our customers, you often don't have control who's sending SNMP requests into your infrastructure. So if you've enabled the SNMP authentication failure trap, we're going to decode that out of the box, and we're going to put some protection behind that to eliminate the noise. So this is, again, protecting from a flood of this type of an event. And again, we're using a little bit different rule set where we're actually doing a 5-minute release period. So SNMP authentication failures, again, this is one that we get from customers as being pretty common, so we added it in as a standard event. The next one that we're going to look at is the filter port status event. Now, this one's really interesting, and it's especially interesting for customers who are using SNMP traps. If you've enabled devices to send SNMP link up and link down traps to your devices, you could get flooded with a lot of traps, especially on things like layer 2 access ports. Now, in Intuity, out of the box, if it's a layer 2 port, we're going to inhibit the generation of a state event, so an operation port down event. So we poll for port state changes, and if a port goes down on a port, we're going to generate an event saying that port's down. On a layer 2 access switch, those ports out of the box will be inhibited from sending and generating those events. Now, if you're sending traps, the traps don't know that you did that, that you made that definition and that rule change that said, I don't want to see port changes, port downs on a layer 2 port. So you would get flooded with link up and link down events. This rule actually leverages a Groovy script, and I'll take a look at this in a minute, but we're looking for a trap-based event, either link up, link down. We rename it as a port link down or port link up, and then we apply a rule here that is actually looking at your configuration in the system. So we look at that interface and we identify if you've set that interface to not generate a port outage event, we're going to leverage that information. So if you're supposed to get port outages, they'll come through. If you've disabled port status changes, we're going to catch it here, and that rule is going to come back as a true, and then we're going to discard the event. So we've now added a rule into the system. This is enabled by default, where you will eliminate link up, link down traps on ports where you don't care if they go up and down. Obviously, on an infrastructure port, you do. This would be suited for things like, access ports. The next section that we're going to look at is some of the work that we do for flap detection. So again, flapping ports can generate a lot of noise, especially if you don't know if it's a flapping condition and all you see are up and down and up and down. So in the flapping section, you'll see this as standard out-of-the-box functionality, and they should be enabled by default. We're going to unify first the concept of a pulled operationally down event and a trap-based down. So we put these together, we call them port down. Ports down, I don't care if it's generated by a trap or if it's something that I pulled for. We're going to do the same thing for a port up, and then we're going to take this and we're going to look at the number of occurrences and identify a flap detection rule type. And we're going to identify if it goes down and up more than 2 times over the course of 2 minutes, eliminate those events, and just create an event called port flapping. Now, this will also create a port flapping incident which is even a better way to correlate multiple occurrences of a flapping port. But this is already eliminating some of the noise and enriching what you're seeing, providing a better quality of and better visibility into what's really going on in the network. So again, port flapping is available out of the box. And as I go through these, you'll see the rule types. So like even flapping detection, you can create your own flap detection rules. If you've got a case where you've got something else that's flapping back and forth, and you want to be able to detect that and create something that is an enriched event, you can create your own. So these are some of the out-of-the-box capabilities that we've got. One of the other things, one of the other areas, and I've seen this, I've used Intuity for almost 15 years, and one of the things that I see on networks, especially when you initially deploy, are high number of discards. Discards and faults can be really chatty. I can see a lot of events that are discards. Now, how do you identify what you want to pay attention to if a port's discarding traffic? If it's a port that's got a lot of traffic on it and it's got a nominal or a higher percentage of discards, that could be a performance issue. It's something that you want to pay attention to. Now, you can do some things in the EMS to eliminate discards, and you can certainly change thresholds at the fault and discard level to change the percentage. And again, 1% is set out of the box, and these are enabled. But you also want to look for ports that are generating high amounts of traffic versus low amounts of traffic. And the low traffic interfaces are ones that you probably don't care as much about discards for. So you don't have to pay attention to those. One of the things that you can do with Intuity, and this is enabled out of the box, but it's got a value that you need to set, and that is looking at the packet rate for discards and faults. So before I look at the percentage based on the number of packets that I'm seeing, pull out based on a minimum packet rate ones that I don't need to pay attention to. So if I set this, and I can just highlight this and set an override for it, I could set this to something like 300 packets per second. And what this will do is for any interface that's going to generate this event, first look at the packet rate. If the packet rate's below 300, ignore it. If the packet rate's above that, go ahead and process it. So again, I'm eliminating the noise for low traffic interfaces that are generating discards. And again, it's an out-of-the-box feature. You can use that to very quickly narrow down and get a little narrow down and kind of cut through the noise. The top-end dashboard in Intuity is one way that you can actually see that, because the top-end dashboard is going to show you all the interfaces that are in that top category for faults and discards. Now, let's talk. These are some of the out-of-the-box features. Let's look at a couple use cases in areas where you can extend the EMS to eliminate even more noise. So there's more that you can do using the EMS. The first example that we're going to look at, and this actually came from one of our customers, is discarding events for devices that have just been managed. So you've just onboarded a bunch of devices, and you're going to see some noise from those devices right when you do that, because one of the things that we look at is port status. So I just add a device under management. I see a bunch of ports on this device that are down. It's very likely that they're down, or maybe the device isn't fully configured yet. But because they're down, and they're down the first time that I see that state, I'm going to generate either, very likely a network outage. So one of the things, the customer that we were working with brought that back and said, this is really noisy. Every time I add a device or 100 devices, I'm getting all these events. So we said, let's create an EMS rule that actually looks at the time period from the time that you actually added the device and brought it under management, because we track that, and the time the event came in, and put a rule in place that discards any event for a certain period of time since the device was managed. So if I just added the device in at midnight today, I could actually set a rule that says for the next 24 hours, throw everything away. So I've got a QA period where I can let the device get settled in. I can let the network engineers finish doing their configuration work. And at that point in time, I'm going to call it production, and I'm going to start collecting events. So we'll send you this rule. Actually, any of these extensions, we'll send you examples of them as a follow-up. But this rule is actually looking at 24 hours. You can change the 24 to whatever number of hours that you want to pay attention to. If you want to only throw events away, discard events for 2 hours, you can do that. But this is one area where we found that you can eliminate some noise, especially during that onboarding process. The next one, as a use case, and again, this came from one of our customers, is high port utilization events where the port utilization is over 100%. Now, I've seen this for years, and it's usually on interfaces like VLAN interfaces that don't have a reference speed set. So how do you determine utilization percentage if you don't know what the actual reference speed is? You can look at traffic, but you can't actually look at a percentage because you've got nothing to calculate that on, in which case all of the percentages are going to be over 100%. Now, a good way to look at this is actually, again, looking at the top-end dashboard and identifying port utilization. And if you see interfaces that are over 100%, it's a good indication that you've got that problem. If you're ticketing on high port utilization, you're probably generating tickets on stuff that's really considered noise. So how do we get rid of events for ports with that are generating utilization events over 100%? The best way to do this, and this is again a rule that we'll send over, is to look at the event type. So I'm picking an event type set that is everything about utilization. I probably only need to pay attention to the port utilization high and high cleared events, but I'm adding in anything that's related to port utilization here. So if the event is in this set, I'm going to apply some logic using Groovy that looks at the inbound port speed for that interface. So the source is whatever the source is for that event, and in this case, it's going to be an interface. And I'm looking at the inbound speed, and if that inbound speed is set at 0, in which case most VLANs, if a bandwidth is not set or a reference speed is not set, they're going to come back as 0. If the port speed equals 0, that test is going to pass. All I need to do, discard the event as an action. So this will automatically, once you deploy this, it's going to eliminate all those events that are over 100%. So again, this is another way to really do a good job in cutting back some of the noise. Now, we've talked about standard events. We've talked about visualization methods. Let's talk a little bit about traps and syslog. I work with customers, and we have discussions about SNMP traps. And some customers try to avoid leveraging SNMP traps because, and the reason is once you configure trap forwarding on your network devices, they can really generate a lot of events. And you end up looking at stuff that's a lot of noise. So what do you do with that? I'm a proponent of using traps. It's a good way to improve a very visible look, a very clear look into the behavior of the network. Traps can tell you a really good story. The idea is you need to filter through the traps to figure out what the story is you want to tell. So eliminate the noise from the traps you don't care about and process the traps for the ones that you do care about. So if we go back to the concept of an unknown trap, I've configured a lot of devices to send traps to my Intuity server. I've not decoded those traps and added any custom events into the Intuity event management system yet. So I'm going to see everything come in as an unknown trap. And again, this is very chatty. I've got just a few devices that are doing this, and I'm getting a lot of traps. One of the things that you can do to get a better picture on really how many devices are sending me unknown traps and what are those traps is, again, with this dashboard that Larry and I created, I can actually look at the traps and I can look at the incidents. But But the way that I'm looking at it is leveraging, again, a view. So I've created a view, and if I edit that view, you can see that I've got an event filter that is only looking at unknown traps. So the only traps that I've got in the system are, if I go way down to the bottom, you'll see I've got unknown trap highlighted. So create a view that's got all your devices in it and includes only the unknown traps. You can use this view very quickly to identify the devices that are sending these and also any incidents that are being generated that are unknown traps as well. Another thing that you can pay attention to, and this happens in some of our larger multi-server configurations, network operations is going to configure the SNMP forwarding targets for devices, and they may set the forwarding to go to the wrong Intuity server. In this case, you're going to start seeing events on the system for devices that aren't being managed. Because we don't manage that device, we don't know where to put those events, so they end up showing up in a lot of different views. One thing that you want to do is, again, create a view, and create a view here. I've got one for unmanaged devices. And in this view, I don't include any devices, but I'm going to include all of the events that are in the EMS. So I'm only going to see events, and primarily this is going to be unknown traps or even possibly some traps that you've added into the system. But you're going to see sources for these events showing up as IP addresses because we don't know what to call it. But in the case where you see anything here that is device related, it's likely a trap coming from a device that is misconfigured. So again, another way to peel back the onion, identify some noise. The best way to handle this is to go and reconfigure the device with the proper forwarding target to the right Intuity server. Now, you can certainly make a configuration setting in Intuity that says automatically throw away any events from unmanaged devices. So you can take a very broad approach to this to eliminate it. I'm more of a proponent for finding the devices that are misconfigured and fix those. But you have an option to go either way. One of the other things that you can do, certainly, instead of paying attention to unknown traps, is to configure those trap events. Now, again, I won't go into details as to how to do this, but once you do this, you'll have access to all of the trap events, and you can take a specific trap event and do deduplication over it. You can augment that trap. You can enrich that trap. You can do hold downs on that trap. It's just like any other event in the system. So this takes it from an unknown trap into something that's got more meaning, and then you can make a decision as to what you want to do. Now, as our final topic, let's talk a little bit about syslog. Syslog, again, is very chatty. A lot of customers avoid syslog. They don't like to see syslog in their monitoring system. I'm a proponent of it, again, because I can actually make use of the information within that syslog message, again, to tell a story about what's going on in the network. So rather than looking at syslog messages and saying, syslog error, syslog warning, syslog information, the same event type on the same device doesn't really tell me a story. What you want to look at is to add a rule into the system or add a series of rules into the system that enable you to look at the details of a syslog and create a custom event for that. So this is actually, I was working with a customer in the West Coast, and they were seeing a lot of syslog errors, and they were paying close attention to the up-down payload that's in the message. Now, in the details, if I go back to, let's go back to one of these. If I look at the details, and I don't have a syslog message here, but I would see a syslog error as an event, and the details would include up-down. So the payload of that syslog is really the piece that's telling me the story. So what I can do within an EMS rule is augment that syslog and customize it. And I can do it very easily. I've just got a rule here that's looking for a syslog message, and then I've got a attribute check. I'm looking at the reason attribute. Now remember, the reason attribute maps to the details column for the events dashboards. So I'm looking at the reason. I'm looking at a matching criteria because I want to look within that and match something. And then I'm just simply using some simple regex to look for up-down. It's a very simple rule. You can use this with any syslog payload if you're looking for the definition of that syslog. Based on that, that match passing, all my tests are going to pass. So I'm going to take an action. And all I'm doing within the action is setting the event type to a custom event that actually is now giving me a better definition of what that syslog is, and I'm throwing the original syslog message away. So I've eliminated noise. I've enriched the system because I'm getting better visibility, and my visibility is telling me a clearer story. I think with that, that's all I've got to cover. Pat, let's turn it over to you and see if we have any questions.
Okay, we have one question that came in, and it is, I have some devices where the CPU utilization will spike over the configured threshold. This happens several times a day. I don't care about CPU utilization spikes, and this is adding to the noise in my incident dashboard. Is there an easy way to configure a holdback so I only see the incident if the threshold has been exceeded for a specific period of time? For example, 10 minutes.
This is Larry. Yes, you can do that. We provide you with a set of out-of-the-box rules to do that. We call them N of M. And P, if you want to bring those up.
Sure.
So typically most customers call them holdbacks. We call them N of M. You'll see there's a list of ones that we ship with the standard distribution. And then the top one there is N of M for processor utilization. These are disabled by default as indicated by the blue icon with the two vertical lines. You want to just bring that up in the edit window. So you can apply conditions if you wanted this to apply to a specific set of devices. You can do view-based conditions and so forth. But if you wanted this to apply globally across the entire footprint, then you set the condition to none as it is here in its default value. Then you set a release condition. The release condition determines when that event will appear in the event dashboard. If that underlying event is tied to an incident type, then the incident will be displayed as well. In this case, if we wanted to set a 10-minute hold back, and 10 minutes is basically 2 polling cycles, as we poll at 5-minute intervals, you would set the condition to be, the release state to be 100% for at least the last 10 minutes, and then that event will be released. We are flexible with the release condition. You can set a percentage other than 100%. So we'll measure the time that event has been in that state, and then if it exceeds that percentage, we'll release it. The two most common types that I've seen customers deployed are this one that Pete's showing you, and the other one is network outage. We've got a couple of service providers that have enabled that N of M. These are the ones that ship with out of the box, but you can add a rule type if you want to go to the add rule, and you can apply N of M by selecting the N of M suppression from the type, and then if you click the add and the opened by, you can see here that you can apply the N of M release condition to any event type that is in this list. Do you have any more questions, Pat?
Yep, we have another one. Pete, can you please show again how to filter out the SNMP agent not responding incidents?
Sure, absolutely. So let me go back to this one. Let me find. Well, one thing that I did was
filtered it on the dashboard, I think.
Yeah, I filtered it in the dashboard. So the first place to do this, and obviously SNMP no responses, that's not an event that you want to discard because you need to fix those devices. But within the dashboard, let me go back to my view. I created a view. I just created a view called Tech Talk, and inside this, I created a sub-view. In here, this view includes all of the devices. I've got everything that I'm managing in my network by default. And I've created a filter in the event view that is filtering out for any incidents to just look for everything except for device. So I've highlighted everything. Effectively, I'd select this. I can go down to the bottom, and I can select, kind of do a shift click to select everything. Then I went out and found device not responding and selected it, just to unhighlight it. Now I'm using the dark theme, so everything in the light theme is going to be backwards in color. So you can see here that this device not responding to SNMP is excluded from my filter, which effectively, once I apply this and go to the dashboard that we've got set up, is going to show me everything with the exception of SNMP no responses. Now, I could do the same thing for events. I could create an event filter that includes everything with the exception of SNMP agent not responding. But I like this look because I can see everything from an event standpoint, but what I pay attention to are the incidents. Okay?
Yep, thanks, Pete. That looks like that's it on the questions.
Okay. Let's go back to the presentation, and you want to go to, go past that. Yeah, so we do have some helpful resources. We have an online help center for specific ENA related issues, and then we have posted over the years, we've had several tech talks on the event management system. Even though these are older, for older releases, they still apply because the same rule sets are pretty much contained in the current software. And these are the links to the YouTube center there. And then if you go to the next slide, we have had several patch releases. One of the patches, we added the dark theme. We've added support for wireless dashboards. And then we also now support our Remedy SSO integration for BMC customers, although that integration is there for any customer that wants to integrate with our SSO. And last slide, please. So to wrap it up, we will be placing a recording on our YouTube center shortly after today's session. The next Tech Talk is scheduled for April 10th, and the topic there will be configuration management. And as always, we'd love to have your feedback, submit questions, or if you have ideas for future Tech Talk topics, you can send an email to tech.talks@intuity.com. Thanks for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again on April 10th for our session on configuration management.